Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. I'm going to share my screen. It's 4 o'clock my time, so we'll get started right now. Welcome and thank you for attending Culinary Arts for Florida, How to Manage Successful Lab Sessions with Chef John Draz. My name is Abby Hess, and I'm the Marketing Development Manager at GW Publisher. GW provides print and digital resources for career and technical education, and we're excited to offer this webinar exclusively for our Florida educators ahead of your state's upcoming CTE adoption, where our authors and editors have worked to align our content to your state standards for the Culinary Arts 1 course. This title is also aligned to the American Culinary Federation certification, which is part of Florida's CAPE list. Now, before we get started, a few housekeeping items for today's webinar. You will be in listen-only mode, but we definitely want to hear from you. So if you've used Teams before, or if it's new to you, you'll see icons across the top of your meeting window, and there is a chat box where you can have discussions, pop in ideas or suggestions of what you've done during labs and lab time. And there's also a Q&A icon that it has a little question mark on it. If you have questions that you want John to answer throughout, please pop your questions in there. And my colleague Josh Carlson will take note of those. And once we get to the Q&A portion of the presentation, we'll be sure to ask those questions and get those answered for you. We're so excited to have our GW co-author of the 4th edition of the Culinary Professional here with us today. So John Draz received his associate's degree from the Culinary Institute of America and was the recipient of the Edward T. Hanley Scholarship. During his nearly 30 years in the field, Chef Draz has worked at numerous restaurants, including the Ritz-Carlton Chicago, the Winnetaka Grill, the 95th, and hopefully I'm not pronouncing this wrong, but the Café Provençal. In 1983, Chef Draz was featured in the PBS television series Great Chefs of Chicago. He was a founding faculty member of the Kendall College School of Culinary Arts in Evanston, Illinois. And while serving on the faculty, he taught a wide variety of subjects related to professional cookery. Chef Draz served as the chair of the culinary department from 1988 to 1991, supervising all aspects of instruction in college food service. He's earned certifications from the American Culinary Federation, including Certified Executive Chef and Certified Culinary Educator. In addition, Chef Draz has experienced entrepreneurship as a chef owner of a 300-seat fine dining restaurant. He has extensive consulting experience, lending his talents to numerous independent restaurants, as well as organizations such as McDonald's, Grown Corporation, Quaker Oats, and the National Dairy Board. He was a past executive research chef for Ed Miniat Inc., a senior research chef for Swift Prepared Foods, and in 2023 was inducted into the Honorable Order of the Golden Toque, an association of accomplished chefs with membership limited to 100 worldwide. Chef Draz has now started his own consulting business, offering his knowledge and expertise to manufacturers, restaurants, trade, and commodity groups and educational institutions. So I'm sure you're excited to hear from Chef Draz. The new 4th edition of his textbook, The Culinary Professional, is available for you to review, and you'll have the opportunity for us to send print and digital samples of it to you during this webinar. The Culinary Professional is richly illustrated, comprehensive culinary arts program written for the high school student with an approachable writing style and design. Hundreds of photos of professional tools and ingredients with step-by-step directions for basic culinary skills and cooking methods makes this textbook a must-have for learning how to safely prepare delicious dishes in the lab. This title also includes cross-curricular activities in reading, writing, science, technology, math, nutrition, and sustainability, with guidance for students to build a professional e-portfolio. Experienced authors like Chef Draz focus on what to expect when entering the culinary arts industry, from workplace ethics to working in teams to developing taste for quality control. And without further ado, we'll hand it over to Chef John Draz to talk about successful culinary lab sessions.
Well, Abby, thank you very much for that introduction, and thank you all for being here. We're going to talk today, or I'm going to talk today, and hopefully we'll get a dialogue going by the end of this about teaching lab sessions in the instructional kitchen. And I think we all know it's not easy, and it requires a certain amount of planning. And I'm really not going to say, anything revolutionary here, but I think just the fact of taking a holistic look at the experience of the instructors and the students, and how we go about organizing these lab sessions is very helpful. A little bit about kind of where I am. I taught for 16 plus years, and taught a wide variety of culinary classes. I think I taught everything but baking and pastries in the curriculum of the institution I was at. And then my career shifted to me working as a research chef, which required a lot of travel. So I didn't have the chance to teach on a full-time basis. I would teach occasionally, doing special classes and things, and be a guest lecturer and things like that for over the years, regularly, to stay involved in education. But since I started my own company, I this year had the opportunity to teach a full semester as an adjunct and at community college in my area. And it just reminded me, or brought back, all the challenges of doing a lab session with a new group of students, or a group of students who, and getting them through and being successful, and having the most effective and the most rewarding situation that you can have in this culinary education realm here. So, like to talk about the challenges, and then, talk about what we can do to maybe address some of those challenges. The biggest challenge is there's never enough time, short class periods. And most of my teaching experience is done at the post-secondary level. I know that the class periods are even shorter for high school and technical school curriculum. This is really, how do you get some really meaningful experience in students, and let them demonstrate what they can do, when you're up against the bell. Some other challenges, maybe underequipped labs. Maybe you have to adjust your lab plan to get, you may only have one wok in the kitchen, and you got to take turns, or you may have to do other things because of just the physical limitations that we have to deal with. The other thing that I think is very challenging is, teaching. Most of us teach on non-consecutive days. There are a few programs, and like CIA and Johnson and Wales, where students just focus on one topic every day for a matter of a couple of weeks. That's really actually super effective. But what we're dealing with is the idea that students have been away from our topic and discussion and our lab, and we've got to, maybe it's once a week, or maybe it's twice a week, whatever it is. But those days in between, we have a lot of seepage, and we've got to bring them back up to where they were when they left the class the time before. So those I see as have been, in my experience, the biggest challenges. I'm sure there are others. And Abby, are we going to do a poll here?
Yep, I am clicking the launch button. So on your screen, you should see a window pop up, and you can interact with this. So if there's a challenge that's not on the screen right now that you have in conducting lab sessions, or if it's one that is on the screen, share what you feel like your biggest challenge is, and that will help lead to good discussion as well. So take a moment to do that.
Yeah, I'm interested to know on what everybody's thinking, and where your challenges are here. This has been my experience, but I'm interested to learn as much as I can.
Oh, yep, here we go. We have some. So as people put their response in there, you'll be able to see it. We should all see it. And then you can, I believe you can even thumbs up it too. So we had one having students read the recipe.
We're going to talk about that. I've got some tricks on, not tricks, but some thoughts on how you can overcome that challenge.
There we have following directions, so similar. Great. So this poll will continue to be live. You can click the little X on your own screen so that it's not right in front of you. But if you have more ideas, you have the chance to do that. We are also getting in the chat the testing schedule. Someone couldn't submit in the response, but another one would be the testing schedule, when to test and assess students. So another good one.
Okay. So yeah, let's go to the next slide then. And, of the challenges I listed, in my mind, the biggest one is time. I had one chef instructor in my experience who was a student who, every day would start class with saying, everybody turn to the clock and say good morning to the boss. Timeliness is, an indispensable quality of a cook. It's been that's been touted since the 1700s when the physiology of taste was written by Briant Savarin. Okay, so how do we make the best use of the little time that we have in the lab, in the kitchen? First one is starting sessions on time. I've done this both ways where, there's always stragglers who come in, and do you wait for them? So you're only saying what you need to say once, and get everybody together. And, you might waste as much as 4 or 5 minutes of valuable class time. I think over the years, I've come to the conclusion, my own personal opinion is, start on time. And, when that person's missing the first 3 or 4 minutes of instruction, and it happens a couple times, they're going to hopefully, and at least in my experience, they make an effort to, maybe with a little bit of reminder and a little bit of direction, but they make an effort to be there on time and be where they need to be when they need to be there. One of the aspects of culinary arts, both in instruction as well as in the professional kitchen, is the idea that every time we do a task, or every time one of our cooks does a task, we should be consciously striving to be more efficient. Do it in less time, and do it more accurately. And you see above the stopwatch there, I have long believed that, at least in culinary arts, we talk about skills and developing skills. We start with accuracy, but we advance skill by maintaining that accuracy and doing it more efficiently. Whether it's knife work, whether it's sauteing, whether it's pastry work, how can I be more efficient every time I do that task? And that's something that I think, if you can instill that in your students, it will help them not just in their culinary education, but in their culinary career, because it's really, a very fundamental part of getting to become a more skilled cook or chef. We have very short class periods, and the one solution is breaking recipes or tasks or labs into multiple sessions. I think probably one of the best examples of one of the most challenging labs to plan for is, something that's a long cooking process, like say maybe doing a pot roast or a braised beef. Where you've got, knife work at the beginning, you've got prep, you've got searing, then you've got slow moist heat cooking, and then you've got finishing the dish, the sauce, and garnishing it perhaps. There are very few things in cooking that can't be started and stopped. And we essentially do this in the professional kitchen. If you think about how large banquets are done, prep for banquets, large banquets maybe starts 2 or 3 days ahead. And, that dish or those dishes that are being served, different steps are done along the way up into, the final cooking of it right before right before the event. So, if I'm doing pot roast, there's nothing that says I can't do all the knife work one day. We can't do we can maybe even get searing and braising start to simmer. And, it may not be fully done. We can stop it, chill it, and restart the process again and finish the recipe. And it may take us more than one lab session to do it. One of the challenges of doing this is, do you have enough storage space to keep people's recipes? Do you have enough equipment that you can tie up pots and pans to hold the product in? Another thing is, if you've got a blast chiller, that's really helpful for, starting cooking process and, stopping it, chilling the product down very quickly so that we don't leave our product in the danger zone for too long. So whenever you can. And I would say, again, the cooking process, I think maybe the exception to this is baking. Once your meringue is whipped, you got to go with it. Once your dough is proofed and your yeast is where it needs to be, you've got to go on to the next step. So, pastry chefs and pastry exercises are probably a little bit more challenging in those days. But in the terms of cookery, there's no reason to not think about or stop and think about, where can I, divide this recipe into steps to be done over more than one lab session. The last thing I think that we're going to talk about, and I will go into more detail about this in one of the later slides, is students, having them create an itinerary, having them create a timed plan for how they're going to use their time in the lab beforehand. And we'll get to this a little bit more in in one of the future slides here. But it's a really powerful tool. Actually, something that I was taught to do as a student, and something that I've used as an instructor as well. Can we go on to the next slide, please? Okay, so we're going to break this look at, if we call it a holistic look, or a larger look at how we approach lab situations and planning and executing lab classes, before, during, and after. So let's start with the before, of course, and the biggest thing in not just the lab, in an instructional kitchen, but in kitchens in every sense of the word, mise en place, French for everything in place. And it is really, in kitchens, it is a religion. It is a philosophy that anybody who's worth their salt in their kitchen, lives by. And, on the converse, we can look at when things didn't go right during service, or when a lab didn't go right. And 9 times out of 10, I would say it was mise en place. We didn't have the right preparation. Okay. And I believe in this. And, even before I got into cooking professionally as a Boy Scout, the Boy Scout motto is be prepared. Preparation is everything. And, it's really, the better you can prepare beforehand, the better things you can set things up, the more likely you're going to be successful. Okay, so next slide, please. One of the things that I think is important is that students come into the lab situation, and they come into the lab situation aware of what they need to know. They're prepared when they come in. And that is a big part of including the students in on the lesson plan beforehand. Okay. Students have the recipes, so they know what recipes are going to be executed that day, or they're going to be required to prepare. Okay. have they mastered these techniques or learned these techniques? Just giving somebody a recipe and saying go out and saute something. If there's no background and no instruction, following it up is recipe for disaster. And in terms of techniques and in terms of not just recipes, but more so techniques, demonstrate whenever possible and demonstrate as close to the lab situation as possible. I think one of the greatest scenarios, my most successful teaching was where I could lecture, talk about what we were going to do that day, demonstrate it, and then followed up immediately with going into the lab and having the students execute. It's fresh in their minds. They can see it. They can make the connections that much easier. The ingredients, do we have all the ingredients on hand? Part of the mise en place or part of the lesson plan. And most important also is the desired outcome. If you've demonstrated a technique or a recipe or a dish, students can hopefully see the finished product and visualize and hopefully taste and experience what the desired outcome is. But also, it's important to highlight, what are the things that you're looking for that makes a quality product. It's properly browned, it's fork tender, the sauce is nappe, whatever is applicable there. That's important to share with the students so they know where the road leads in the lab, as it were. Okay, next slide, please. So, in terms of outlining and thinking about all the things that we as instructors to mise en place or get ready, beforehand, none of us like the recipes that are in the book. We all like to use our own recipes. But doing that requires probably to have printed handouts. And do the students have those ahead of time? Have you made copies of them and distributed them as far in advance as possible? Okay. Do we have all the equipment or smallwares? We all know that, things are continually borrowed from one lab kitchen to the other and things don't get put back in place. But before that lab session starts, do you do walk through and make sure that you've got the right number of bain-maries and the right number of tongs and the right number of whatever smallwares or tools that you need. Station setup, I think, is really important. Assigning students a place to work rather than just having them choose. And then the setup for that station. I think the best way to do it is something visual, either a drawn diagram or map or a photo of, this is where you should have your sanitizer bucket. This is where you should have your cutting board. This is where you should have the quarter sheet pan with all your hand tools on it. This is where keep your product. Having a plan for each station, the way it should be laid out and the way it should be set up is key, rather than just leaving it, especially at the beginning, rather than leaving it to chance or to just the interpretation or the creativity of the students. Show them what you want and show them what's going to be the most efficient. Okay, coming in with that, I think, saves a lot of time. There's a lot of questions are answered, and the students can more successfully get their mise en place together. Okay, ingredients. Do we have all the ingredients we need? Well, we know there's always changes about something's not available or we have to make a substitution. Note those beforehand as early as possible. We're going to be using dried basil today, and 1 teaspoon instead of 1 tablespoon of fresh basil, whatever the change or substitution ends up being. One of the things I think that really makes for more efficient time and more focus on teaching a technique is the fact of, or the practice of pre-portioning ingredients if possible. Now, that's not to say that measuring ingredients being able to tear a scale or measure ingredients by volume, and setting up, your own mise en place is not a valuable skill and is one that we should teach. But I think once that skill has been mastered, if I weigh, the fact that somebody's going to measure a teaspoon another time against, well, maybe I'll get an extra 10, 15 minutes in the lab session by having product pre-portioned, or having the mise en place pre-done. I think I would go with the gaining that time. Maybe I wouldn't do it for, say, a final test where you want students to be responsible for, every aspect of the whatever they're preparing for their practical final. And we may want to make sure that, proper measurements are part of the plan for that lesson. But the ability to gain some time and some efficiency, I think should be weighed against, how important that skill is at that point in your curriculum. Another, option here, or kind of a side note to this is, if maybe you don't have time or the labor to get everything pre-portioned, have students portion items by group. Rather than everybody, 20 different students measuring a teaspoon of thyme, one student does the time, measure 20 teaspoons and put them into portion cups, and somebody else is going to measure the carrots, and somebody else is going to scale out the onions, etc. It makes it a little bit more efficient, and it's one way to go about, spending a lot of time with people gathering up mise en place. Unless measuring mise en place or measuring ingredients is part of the lesson plan. If it's not, I certainly think about ways that you can get through that mise en place and scaling portion of the lab more quickly. Okay. Now, besides the instructor's mise en place, there are certain expectations that we should have, and we should enforce, or we should reinforce with students. And it's preparedness. It's what we very often refer to as professionalism. You have the right uniform for your program? Do you have the right tools, the tools that you're responsible for? This is a professional preparedness. Do you have the right uniform? Is it clean? Is it in order? Do you have all the parts of it? Do you have 2 side towels? Do you have an apron? Whatever your policy for your uniform and your program is, that should be part of the student mise en place. Tools. If your students have their own knife kits, they have all the parts to it? Are the knives sharp? Are they in good repair, etc.? We just talked about creating a diagram or a plan for setting up workstations. The students, without having to be prompted, come in, and are they able to set up their station properly, have all the proper elements there. Go back to the top here, a little bit about beginning versus advanced. These professionalism aspects at the very beginning of a program, for beginning students, I think it's important that these are points that are earned towards their performance grade. You get so many points for your uniform, so many points for your knife kit, so many points for setting up your station. At a certain point, this behavior becomes ingrained, hopefully, and in advanced classes, it's not really so much, we don't want our advanced students earning points for doing, simple, basic expectations as professionalism is. But at some point in a program, that needs to be an expectation. And rather than earning points towards doing those things, it becomes a deduction from the grade if they're not, those behaviors aren't exhibited. So, I think there's 2 different ways to do this. And in my experience, especially with, the first term, first quarter, as you're trying to build that sense of professionalism. It becomes part of the what you're working towards. Later on in most programs, I think it becomes an expectation, and I think it should be treated that way in terms of the way grades are assessed and what motivates students for the grade. So the last one on this list here is recipes, and somebody mentioned already, not thankfully, but I agree with, getting students to read the recipes and getting students to have the recipes. One of my colleagues came up with a really what I thought was an effective method for doing this. Aside from having the students know what recipes are going to go for each lab session and reminding them of everything, the idea of this instructor would never pick a recipe that was for the right number of portions or the right size batch for the lab. And he would require, as part of the preparation for the lab, have students scale the recipe. And not just scale the recipe, but write it out on a blank recipe sheet with the old and the new conversions, and rewrite the steps for the method for the recipe. This way, students really have to read the recipe in order to do the conversion and to rewrite the instructions. So I think there's ways to do this, and I thought that was something I hadn't thought about, and I thought was a very effective way of getting students to prepare for the recipes before coming into the lab. And I mentioned that he used a blank recipe sheet, which I thought is really good. When I first started teaching culinary arts, electronic devices weren't really an issue. But in this latest round of teaching, students are, not necessarily writing the recipes out on paper or copying them or printing them up on a printer. They're showing me they have their recipes on their cell phone or on their tablets. And I know there are some programs that actually operate through using electronic devices in the kitchen. And I'm not sure. I'd kind of like to get some opinions on from people on whether it's been useful for them or effective or not. In my case, my experience has been it was very ineffective. Students who were using these devices spent a lot of time scrolling up and down looking for the material on or their screen would shut off automatically and they'd be turning it back on, maybe with greasy hands and all kinds of. It was really kind of a waste of time. So this last class I gave, it was a small class, it was under 20 students. So I gave everybody in the class two things. I gave them a page protector, a plastic page protector, and a little, they've all seen these magnetic clips that for memos and things like that. And said, this way, the kitchen we were in, every station had a metal shelf over it that the magnetic clip would clip to. Could hang the recipe or the instructions or your itinerary on the clip right in front of you at eye level. Never even have to put down your knife to look at it, so that it's low tech, but it's very effective. So rather than spending a lot of time going through your laptop or your tablet or your cell phone, that's where your recipes are. Go old school. It's simple, but its simplicity makes it that much more efficient. So I'd like to hear other people's thoughts on whether electronic devices are a hindrance or a benefit to productivity in the lab. So let's go to the next slide then. So, online printable recipe collection. Oh yeah, so we do have with the textbook, we have recipes online and they're printable and they're also scalable online. In writing the book, we have a kind of limited number of recipes. One of the thoughts was that, like as I said before, everybody has their own ideas on what recipes they want to use and what works best for them in their lab situation. So the recipes are all very basic, very straightforward, and easy to that practice of scaling something. Unfortunately, this is one of those things where they can just put in the new number of portions they need and maybe not even read the whole recipe. So it's great to work with and it's easy, but that idea of rescaling the recipe on paper to ensure that somebody has read the recipe, this might be counterproductive to that effort, but it is one of the things that we're proud of with the textbook is that these are available online and they're easy to use and easy to replicate and print up. Okay, next slide. So the idea I mentioned earlier about a student itinerary for the lab session. They know what recipe or recipes they're going to be making. And I think it's very useful to have students create one of these, or possibly I've done it in a situation where you kind of do this as a group exercise. How much time are we going to need to do this part? How much time are we going to need to do this part? But by doing this, or in order to do this, there's really 3 steps in this process. One is listing all the tasks, okay, which is easy enough. But sometimes it's the idea of the importance of checklists. If students just listed all the tasks, they might not miss one. There's a lot of times there's something that's totally missed, and if you just written it down and checked it off, you would have students would have had it accomplished. But then the second step, I think that's really probably most important in my mind, is prioritization. Taking that list of tasks and putting it in the order of priority. And usually that order has to do with what's the longest cooking time, or what's the longest time I need to allot for preparing something. What's the biggest time commitment? And we usually try to put those things up front and do them first. In some cases, there's a logical order that we have to debone the chicken before we can brown it, or etc. The logical order and trying to do the longer tasks more early is really the idea of prioritization. And this is a really good exercise for students to get. It really makes them think about what they're doing, why they're doing it, and how they can do it most efficiently. The last part is then to say, oh, we've got an hour and 45 minutes or whatever our time period is to work with this. What are we going to do for this time, and how are we going to do it? And getting students to assign a time. And the first couple times you do this, maybe you do this as a class. To get to saying, well, I think it should take 15 minutes to get to your mise en place, and it's maybe going to take you another 15 minutes to bone out the chicken and 10 minutes to brown it off. And then we know it's going to take X amount to braise it. And while it's braising in the oven, we're going to be cutting our vegetable garnish for the end, and we're going to then finish the sauce, and plate up and present, and everything down there in a time schedule, kind of like the way you run a railroad. This is really I think effective. It's in order to do this, students have got to go through identifying the tasks, putting them in proper order, or prioritizing them, and then allotting a certain amount of time for them. And it doesn't mean that they're going to hit every one of these on exactly on the mark, but they know that if it's 10:35 and they're still boning their chicken, they need to step it up. I think this is, having the students take some ownership for, what's going to happen and how they're going to utilize their time is a great skill for the professional kitchen, great skill for, life in general for a lot of other tasks. So this is what I meant by having a student itinerary, or having students create an itinerary for their lab. Okay. List of tasks with the time. And then during the lab session. Okay. Um, Actively observe. Okay. Organize your lab for so it's easy. You've got good sight lines from wherever you're at. If you've got a large kitchen, having people spread out in various corners maybe may not be as effective as having them grouped in one area where it's easy to see, more of what's going on at any one time. Circulate. I was program chair for program for a number of years. And as the department chair, one of the most distressing things I would find would be to walk into a lab session and have an instructor sitting at the desk or table up front. Yeah, they're watching students. They're in sight lines. They can see the students, but what are they doing? They're grading tests while the students are working. Well, if you're grading tests, you're not really providing the oversight and the feedback and the coaching that you should be. Circulating. What you can see up close and what you can see from across the room are very different things. And going from student to student, station to station, continually walking around, makes you an active part of the lab. And as you're doing that, verbal feedback, concise. You can't get into a long discussion, or you don't want to get into a long discussion, but little verbal feedback like, oh, really good job browning the chicken, or oh, we need to think about working on practicing your knife cuts because they're not that great, or oh, here you should turn down the flame a little bit, your pan's getting too hot. That little bit of coaching is important in interaction with the students and bringing them along. There's always the question of how many students in a lab situation can one instructor manage effectively. I have my own opinions on it, but I think there's a number of variables. It depends on what is being taught, what level the students are at, the facility, how easy the facility is to work with. But at a certain point, we, you either have to break it, the lab class up into smaller groups, or you need to have more than one set of hands and eyes to work with the students as they're in the lab session. Monitor the itinerary. You can be the verbal alarm clock. It's 10:35. If everybody should have their chicken in the oven now. If you don't, you're behind. It's 10:50 now. Everybody should be done cooking, and we're now cleaning up. Don't be afraid to remind the students of what time it is and where they're at in the lab session. We always have the situation where we have some students who are very productive, very experienced, and they are done early. And on the other hand, we have students who continually are challenged by trying to complete things in the right amount of time. In both instances, maybe there should be something in the back of your mind about what you do in those situations. One is, if you can plan a little extra time, to make up for, students who may not be as experienced or may not be as quick as others. That's great. Or the other thing is, is there something that you can jettison from, it's getting towards the end of the lab and the students are behind, what's the least important thing there that you can maybe tell them not to do and focus on the more important parts of the lesson. And then there's, extra, what do you do with the students who are done early, rather than, having them sit or watch or whatever, keep them engaged. Maybe it's so, hey, great, your dish is done. Now we've got 15 minutes before we need to clean up. Why don't you show me 2 different plate presentations that you could do with this dish, whatever it is. It might even be as simple as extra knife practice, practicing some basic skills. Whatever it ends up being. Be prepared for those situations, because those are the students that usually want more, and I find it's rewarding to be able to give them as much as they can handle. Always plan for a time to evaluate the product or to evaluate the lesson and to review product, and build in cleanup time. I'm sure we've all been in a situation where lab is over and we're doing pots and pans that didn't get done because there wasn't enough time. And with every pot and pan that you scrub or clean and put through the 3-compartment sink or the dishwasher, you're probably thinking to yourself, rightly, what went wrong and what can we do better to make this not happen again. So, some thoughts about, how to handle things during the lab situation or lab session, I should say. Afterwards, before the students leave class, before they're dismissed, but after the task at hand is done, as I mentioned in the previous one, time for recap and review. We all know that, the more immediate the feedback, the better it is. It's fresh in our minds. We're maybe just still looking at the product that we're evaluating or talking about on feedback. And it should be a dialogue. Here's what I see, but what was your experience? Or students, it's great to have them, talk about, hey, tell the class what problem you ran into and how you solved it. And again, a balanced evaluation, talking about the wins as well as where improvement is needed. And this all takes a few minutes. It takes some time, but we have to plan for it. If possible, before students leave class, start thinking about the next class. If there's handouts to be given, or just a review of next time we're going to do this and this and this. Think about this technique, and this technique, and this technique. Anything you can do to prepare for the next lab session, I think is great. It's thinking ahead. It's the way we work in the professional kitchen. We're looking at the next day's service when that day's service is over, and what can we mise en place? What can we get prepared? Can we set up the stations or put the equipment in a particular order to make things quicker? Maybe it's a time where you can do some preparation or some measurement of ingredients for your next session. Again, it depends on how far in advance is your next session, and how much storage space and how much storage vessels do you have for doing pre-prep on ingredients, etc. But that's really, I think thinking ahead and getting the students to think ahead about what's going to come up is one of the keys here. So, next slide. So, we have a question and answer tab up on the top of the toolbar. Josh, do we have any questions that have been put there that I can maybe address or not?
Yeah, thanks, John. Thanks, John, for that great presentation. The first question we have is, how do you handle someone with dietary restrictions?
I think there's always a substitution, but it's obviously something you need to know about it in advance. And you can plan around whether it's a somebody who is a vegetarian, or it's somebody who has an allergy to a certain ingredient. Uh, Again, that going back to mise en place, if we know about it in advance, and we can make a substitution. It's great to know these things about your students in the first class session about who has any allergies, or who has any food aversions, that you can do that in advance. The worst thing is, I one time had a student go into anaphylactic shock because she was standing next to somebody who was sauteing shellfish. Well, we knew she had a shellfish allergy, but I guess what we didn't consider was just standing near somebody cooking it could trigger her. So I think there's always an ingredient to substitute. If it's somebody can't eat pork, chicken and turkey end up being a great substitute. Or if it's an allergy situation, I think even more care has to be taken. But again, that's the mise en place. Very hard to do on the fly. So you want to know about those situations ahead of time. And maybe that's a discussion for the very first class session. Something you want to bring up with students.
And thank you. The next question is, how do you explain the difference between high quality CTE and a general elective?
I'm sorry, between high quality
CTE and a general elective.
Well, I think it goes back to what are the overall outcomes for your program. What becomes essential, and what becomes nice to have rather than essential to have. What are the outcomes you're having for your students? And again, it's very often in the classroom, within a class semester, we may end up, or I have ended up jettisoning some activities that were nice to have because students weren't up to grade on what their basic skills were. So again, depending on how in depth your program is and what you're promising students as an outcome, is it certification as an ACF-CC, or is it just a list of certain skills? So again, I think that's really driven by what are the program outcomes, and then within the program, what are the outcomes of your particular class.
Doesn't look like we have anything else, but we'll give it another minute or so.
And
Okay.
Josh, maybe we want to address there were two good challenges that came up in the chat at the beginning. One was about a testing schedule. And Tiffany, feel free to, add more about, why that's a challenge. But I guess, John, when you've taught students, when do you have them, sit for a test or prove knowledge? Is it before or after labs, or what do you usually think about for that?
Well, so I mean, I think in my experience, there's two different types of tests. There's a written test, and then there are practical tests. And practical tests, just like any other lab session, and maybe even more so, require planning and having the right mise en place, where students are going to demonstrate a particular skill and do it in the kitchen, in the professional kitchen. So with the practical tests, again, it requires even more, maybe at least as much, if not more, planning. But the other thing is, I think it's important that all the elements that are on the practical test, are elements that students should have had ample amount of time to practice in the lab beforehand. So leading up to that, we should be building to this outcome and building to allowing students to demonstrate that they've developed these skills.
Great. And you had mentioned some things about, multiple levels in one class and having large class sizes, but anything else around that? I know you talked about extra activities or getting rid of activities for students who maybe were going slower than others, but any other ideas?
Yeah, so I mean, as recently as this last semester that I taught, I had some students who were really challenged by the material, and a lot of days it would be kind of get to the end of class session again, having that itinerary, and say, okay, hey, we've only got 15 minutes left in the class, and that's supposed to be cleanup time. You're still working on your assignment. Here's what I want you to do. You're only going to do this part and this part of the assignment, and forget about the rest. And in the instance, the student lost points because they didn't complete everything they were supposed to. But by directing them to, here's the most important thing, and here's what I want you to do if you can in that time. And forget about chopping parsley, forget about cutting garnishes, forget about these things. I want you to just show me that you can get the product cooked to the right degree of doneness. That type of thing, you may have to make some hard choices about what's most important, and what's really the crux of the lab session.
Great. Yeah. And Tiffany actually talked a little bit more about her struggle with the testing. So it sounds like, she might have a plan that they're going to cook a lab one day, and then all of a sudden they're told that a large percentage of the students have to be out of her class for testing that they have to do.
Standardized testing. Okay.
Yeah, or I'm sure, there's other reasons why you have a plan for all students to do something and then some students aren't there. So like, what's the strategy? Do you continue with the students who are there? And then how do you help students make up for missed time?
Yeah, so in some instances, I've been fortunate that there may have been multiple sections of a particular class going, more than one. So, my first go-to would be, if those students could possibly participate in another section of the class to get up to it. Or, it's just you need to maybe scale back your expectations for the next class session, and you'll have to devote some time to bringing those students who weren't there up to speed. It's maybe the same thing that you might have to do with somebody who's absent for an extended period. Some students are going to require a little bit more attention than others, but getting them to up to speed, I think, is important. And a lot of times there's the ability to do things outside of school on their own, and it's like if they have the means and the ability, practice this skill at home. Cook this recipe on a small scale for your family if you can, or I've had students who can. Fortunately, they've been at work and they're working in kitchens, and they say, "Oh yeah, my boss gave me, an extra half hour to work on such and such, so I'd be ready for class." There's lots of different ways it can happen, but just recognizing the fact that you need to bring those students up to speed is, I think, important, rather than just throwing them in the class and hoping for the best, which sometimes happens.
Yeah, great. Well, we're almost out of time. This was awesome to hear your challenges and wonderful to hear all your suggestions, John. I just want to let people know, if you've attended this whole thing, if you would like a certificate of attendance to send to an administrator that you've done a 1-hour online training with Chef John Draz, we're happy to send that to you. Just email me at ahess@g-w.com. I'll put that in the chat. Everyone will also receive the recording from today if you want to look back on it. And in addition to that, if anyone would like a sample of the Culinary Professional, you do receive the sample of the online instructor resources. So in addition to the content itself, obviously there's a lot of prep for culinary arts teachers in preparing for your labs and your lessons. A lot of that work is done for you with full pre-created lesson plans, foods lab rubrics, guided worksheets, test banks, and PowerPoints. So if you'd like to review any of those things, you can, in the chat right now, say yes, and we will send you the online version to review. If you'd like a print text sent to you to review, we can also send that. Just let us know in the chat if you'd want a print or digital portion to review. Great, Tiffany says yes. Anyone else, we can send that to you. And we appreciate your time. And we appreciate you, John. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for the opportunity, and thanks everybody for attending. And I hope this this just gives you a little bit different way of thinking about how to plan for your lab sessions.
Wonderful. Yep. So great. I see some people saying yes. We'll get those samples sent out to you, and then you'll also see the recording coming maybe 24 hours from now. And John, one of the instructors, Brett, says that he utilizes this, and these are great resources. So you've got a fan here already.
Well, thank you, Brett.
Awesome. Okay. Thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful evening. We appreciate it.